you, Christine. We are being recorded. So, Father, thank you for this opportunity, Lord, to make the most of all that you've given us. Lord, thank you that you show us ways that we haven't known before. Your promise was to lead us and to guide us. So, Lord, let our ears and hearts and minds be open to what you have to say to us today through Christine. If it's new ways of doing things, let us be ready to respond to those new ways. And I pray you give Christine boldness and confidence that we can take in and receive gladly what she's saying to us. Just bless this time together. Let it strengthen and refresh us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Over to you, Christine.
Okay, thank you very much, Jenny. And I'll just add my welcome to Jenny's welcome. It's good to see you here. I'm just going to share my screen to start with. Now, last week, I'm aware that everyone could see my notes, so I'm just going to check with Jenny before I start that my notes are not visible and you can clearly see my screen. Let me just, how's that, Jenny? Does that look correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, just shout any time if it goes wrong. Okay. So today is the second in a series of 2 webinars on encouraging generosity in your church. I don't know if all of you were here last time. If you weren't, there is another one about an environment of generosity, which you can catch up on. But if you were here last time, this follows on from that. Now, I'm going to straight away show you a little video. If you were here last time, you'll have seen this already, but it's great to see it again. Now, I'm not sure if I shared my sound. So again, do shout if you don't get the sound on this, Jenny, because I can't tell whether I did or not. So it's a little video just to introduce what we're going to talk about today.
Generosity is at the heart of our faith. And the generosity we show is testament to a lived out faith and our generous God. The God that so loved the world, he gave his only Son. The ministry and mission of the Church of England is largely funded through the incredible generosity of those who give to it. In order to cultivate this generosity within our church, we need both the right environment and the right culture. There are simple steps we can take to encourage generosity. The most important is the first, to pray that God may give us the spiritual gift of generosity so that we increasingly reflect the generosity of God in our ministry and mission. Because, as the Bible tells us, generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. We need to create an environment that encourages people to give, and to do this we need to get 4 things in place. And we use the acronym MINT for these. Mechanisms are the tools that allow giving to take place, such as direct debit, contactless payment, online, legacies, gift aid, and so on. The impact of people's giving needs to be explained, how it enables the church's ministry and mission. The need for people to give must be shown, so they can see where their help is needed and how important it is that they give. And trust must be built, so that people have confidence that the church will spend their gifts wisely and well. If you have these 4 elements in place, then you have created the best environment for people to give. We also need to cultivate a generous culture, where we grow in an understanding of God's generosity towards us and share that generosity through our ministry and mission. To grow a generous culture, there are 4 areas to focus on, and we use the acronym IDEA for these. Inspire people through generous leadership and by celebrating generosity within the life of the church. Disciple members through resources, teaching and learning, so people can grow in an understanding of God's generosity towards them and how they can live generous lives. Embed generosity in the life of the church, in its plans, services and ministry, and weave it into everything it does. Activate generosity by providing opportunities for people to grow in generosity and apply what they have discovered. But you aren't alone in this. The National Giving Team is here to support you as you build your generous church. On our website, you will find a wide variety of resources, guidance, and inspiration for encouraging giving to your church and for growing generosity within it. Thank you, and God bless you for everything you give to the church's ministry and mission.
Okay, so I think that's a wonderful little video. Last week we looked at that first acronym, MINT. So if you remember from that video and from what Jenny said, that's mechanisms, impact, need, and trust. So if all those four things are in place, that sets an environment for giving, a good environment where people are able to give and encouraged to give and encouraged to be generous. Then today we're going to look at the second acronym from the video, IDEA, which we'll pick apart today: inspire, disciple, embed, and activate generosity. So as we saw in the video, that was from the National Giving Team of the Church of England, who said they're here to help, and they've got wonderful resources on their website, and it's really worth a look at some of those resources. I'll be giving you links to that, as some of those as we go through as well. We're also here to help, of course, on a local scale. Jenny and I and our new colleague, whose name is Daniel, we're here to help you as well, and we're here to discuss any of these issues with you that arise today or from our other webinars. We're here to come and help you as you work through developing generosity and a culture of generosity in your churches. So yeah, do call on us. Just another thing I'd like to say before I continue: there's quite a lot of information on some of the slides today, but I will send that all to you, so don't feel you have to write any of that down. You will receive that in an email tomorrow. Okay, so how can we develop a culture of generosity in our church? So we're looking at generosity becoming part and parcel of all we do as a church, and part and parcel of who we are. Not just something that we look at briefly every now and then, but something that's part of who we are as a church. I'm just going to put my phone on silent because it was making a funny noise then. Don't know if you heard it. There we go. Right, so if we move on to inspire. So the first letter in IDEA is I for inspire. There's a little Bible verse there from Acts. In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak, remembering the words the Lord Jesus himself said, it's more blessed to give than to receive. So generosity should be in everything we do, it's a blessing to give. It's a blessing to be generous. It's the way we live our life. It's not just about our money and our financial gifts, but it's about all we do at every part of our life as individuals and as a church as a whole. So in our churches, we should look out for generosity, look out for generous acts that are going on in the church that individuals are doing, or that the church as a whole are doing, and celebrate that generosity. That kind of thing inspires people to be generous. If we celebrate generous acts that are happening, other people will be inspired to be generous. And we need to regularly thank people for the generosity that they show, whether that's in giving their money, whether that's in giving their time, or reaching out to the community. We should thank people for that, and that encourages other people to see that generosity and to be thankful to God for it. I'd just like you now, if you have anything you'd like to share in the chat, just put a couple of comments in the chat of ways that maybe in your church generosity is shown by individuals. By individuals or by the church as a whole. If you could just pop that in chat, it would be great to see some of those ways that generosity is shown in your church. Don't forget to put all panelists and attendees on the drop-down menu so we can all see anything that you share. So as I said, that generosity can be in giving your money, it can be in giving your time, it can be in giving your possessions, in giving freely of talents and abilities, and just reaching out to people. If anyone has anything they'd like to put in chat there of ways that you're generous in your church, not you personally, but ways that your church is generous? If there isn't anything, that's fine. We'll just move on. Okay, I can't see anything for the moment on that one. Let's move on. Moving on. Maybe because I've got the chat box open. It's got stuck. I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. That's working now. So we're still looking at inspiring generosity, and leadership in the church is really important in terms of inspiring people to be generous. If you're a church leader, or if you're a member of the PCC, it's important to communicate how money is being spent to support others, or how people in the church are being generous. It's really good to include testimonies, perhaps, of people who've either benefited from acts of generosity in the church, or of people who've been blessed by being generous and sharing with others, or in giving their money or their time for the church or for the local community. So share those testimonies regularly in services. But leaders should show others the generosity that they want to encourage. So leaders should show that they're committed regular givers financially. They should show that they're committed to the church's work of generosity in the community, or reaching out to others. And it's really important for the leaders to inspire others. Other people will be reluctant to get on board if they don't see their leaders acting out that generosity themselves in their own lives and in their own discipleship. So if you're a leader, I'm not quite sure who's here today, but if you're maybe a member of the clergy, if you're a member of the PCC, think about how you can inspire people by your own personal commitment to generosity in whatever way that is, whether that's money or whether that's outreach or giving of your gifts. How can you inspire others? Last time we talked a little bit about vision and mission, the vision and mission of the church, which are really important to encourage people to be generous. And think about, is generosity part of your vision as a church? And do your plans and your mission reflect God's generosity and the generosity that he calls us to as well? So within your vision, if you have a vision of a church, generosity needs to be a part of that, God's generosity and our response to that. If you don't have a vision or mission statement yet, maybe it's a good idea to think about developing one and remember that generosity within your vision and mission statement. There's all sorts of ways that we can be generous. Perhaps we immediately think of money, but it's not all about money. Money is really important, and somebody with a generous heart is likely to give generously financially. But there's other things as well. Perhaps as a church supporting overseas missions, supporting a food bank, supporting different community groups. Maybe many churches in Cornwall, I know, support Christians Against Poverty, for example, which reaches out to those in debt and vulnerable people in the community. Perhaps you have a really big harvest giving sort of campaign in your church, that at harvest time you give generously to the community. All of these things are examples of generosity. It's good to kind of think about where God is calling you as a church to be generous, and where God is calling you as an individual to be generous. In my church here in Probus, we have a project with a community larder. I'm sure you've heard of community larders that are happening in various places. It originally started actually as a community project, but the church kind of took it on and took responsibility for the project, where we take waste food from supermarkets and provide that for vulnerable people in the community to just come and take for free, with no questions asked, no need to register or anything. People just come and take that food if they're in need. And that's one example of just being generous as a church and inspiring other people in the church and in the community to get on board with that generosity. I was talking about the vision and mission. If we move on, the diocese as a whole has a vision statement and a mission statement The vision of the diocese, which I'm sure you'll all have heard, is to discover God's kingdom and grow the church. Just a vision statement is normally just a short little statement that sums up what you're about. So if you're developing a vision statement for your church, just sum up what you're about as a church. And that sums up what the diocese is about, to discover God's kingdom and grow the church. But within that, the diocese has the Saints' Way mission statement, which is like 5 priorities. And I'm sure you've seen those. The bigger logo there kind of has 5 small logos in it, which represent those 5 priorities. And then the smaller picture is the logo for generosity. So one of those 5 points in the diocesan mission is a church that rejoices in the generosity of God. So the diocese seeks to be a church that rejoices in the generosity of God. And that's the kind of thing that you could include in a mission statement for your church as well. If a church rejoices in the generosity of God, it's a church that will respond to that will respond generously in response to that generosity that God shows us. If you want to see those other priorities, if you haven't seen those already, they're all on the diocese website. You can see what the mission is of the diocese. So kind of in summary of what we've done so far for that first section, to inspire generosity. How can we inspire generosity? Well, just encourage church members to generously support each other, whether that's in raising money, whether that's in providing care in the community, reaching out in whatever way, generously encourage each other to continue to do that. In services, celebrate generosity. Thank God for working through us to share his generosity with others. And like I was saying before, share those testimonies, share those stories. Last time we talked about stories, and make sure that we're hearing those stories of generosity from both sides, from the giver and the receiver, and that will inspire others. Regularly thank God for people's generosity during your intercessions. That can come up in intercessions, those generous things that have been happening, and we can thank God for that. And as I said, including generosity in our vision, mission, and our plans. And always communicate that generosity that the church shows. Communicate that with people so people understand what is happening and will be inspired to get on board. Okay, so that's the I for inspire. We're going to move on now to the D for disciple. I've put the Bible verse there. Everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. That's something that we hear quite a lot, isn't it? In the preparation of communion and in the offertory, we say it slightly differently, different version. I think all things come from you, and of your own do we give you. We say that again and again in our liturgy. And that's a really important verse. Everything is from God, and we give him what is his. So we're not taking from what we have and giving to God. We're giving him back what is his, because everything we have, he's given to us. So in terms of discipleship, generosity is part of our discipleship. Generosity of living and of giving is part of that discipleship, part of our response to our generous God who gives us everything. We need to move away from asking that question. Move away from asking that question, how much of my money should I give away, to asking a different question, how much of God's money do I keep? So all our money is God's. So it's not saying, oh, okay, I've got all this money, I need to give away a little bit to God, to the church. It's saying, I have all this money that God has blessed me with. How much of it do I deserve to keep? And that's a conversation to have with God, to work out how much of that money that you're going to give back to God. I'm sure you all know money can be a really tricky subject. It can be difficult to talk to people about money in the church. We do need patience, we need kindness, we need love. We need to pray for those gifts, pray that God gives us those gifts when we're talking to people about money and about generosity. We need to give people that space and time so that they can have that conversation with God. They can explore individually how God is calling them, how he's asking them to be generous. And I'm talking a lot about money here, but as I said before, it's about other things as well, being generous in our lives, whether that's financially or in other ways. Okay, I wanted to, oh, got stuck again. It keeps getting stuck today. If I can move on this way. There we go. Okay, I just wanted to have a look at 6 steps in generous Christian giving, why people give. As we go through this, I'm going to show you 6 different steps. Think about where most people in your church are at in this process, or maybe where your church as a whole is at in this process. Maybe write a comment in the chat. Let me know where you think your church falls within these 6 steps that I'm going to show you. And it is kind of a process going through these 6 steps, but yeah, just pop it into chat if you can, where you think your church falls within this. Okay, so the first one is survival. So this is the kind of the attitude to giving is survival. So these are people who say, I give a bit when I'm asked to, because the church ought to be there in case I need it. So these are people who value the church for what it can give to them, for the services that they can get from the church. And so they will give a little bit of money if they're asked to give it, because they need the church. They see that they may need the church in the future. Then we have supermarket. So these are people who might say, I'm happy to pay for the cost of the bits of the church that I want to enjoy. So these are people who are looking, they may be involved with a particular group in the church. They maybe attend a regular coffee morning or a toddler group or something, and they're happy to pay for those things that the church provide for them. So these are perhaps people, these first 2 are perhaps people who are outside of the church, maybe not regular church members, perhaps people in the community who value the church for the different things that it offers to them. And these are people who are willing to give money to pay for those things that they benefit from. And then we move on to support. These are people who say that the work of the church is important, so they want to support it. And I think many church members are in that category. They recognise that it is a really important thing that the church is doing, and so they do want to support it, so they give their money to support the church. And then subscription. Again, I think many church members fall into this category. Subscription are those who see themselves as a member of the church. So they want to contribute their share of the costs. So they'll look at what the costs are of the church and contribute accordingly. And that's like a subscription, maybe the same as you might pay for a club that you're a member of, that you want to pay your share of what it costs to keep that club going. And then we move on to submission. Submission is those people who say, my understanding of being a disciple is that I should put God first in my life. So we're moving into more of discipleship now. Like I was saying before, we need to think of God first. We need to give to God first, and it's the first thing in our life. God is the main priority in our life before other things that we might think about. So that's submission. And hopefully many of our church members are in this category too. And then the final category, I truly believe my Lord demands my soul, my life, my all, and that's sacrifice. So you can see it's a little bit of a process that you might want to work through. You might want to encourage people to work through this process. I'm just going to have a look at the chat box. If anyone wants to put in the chat box where you think your church is, or individuals within your church are on that list. I think in general, often I would say that, as I said, the first 2 are maybe people in the local community. The second 2, support and subscription, I think many church members fall within those categories. And then the last 2 are where we really want to aim for, if we're seeing generosity and giving as part of our discipleship, we want to be aiming for that submission and sacrifice at the end. Okay, does anybody want to pop anything in chat about where you are in your church? Not you personally, but where people are. Okay, so David says, sadly, supermarket and support, very, very few in submission and sacrifice. Yeah, and I think that is the case in many churches, that a lot of people are in that supermarket and support. Oh, even, yeah, I was thinking support and subscription, but yeah, even supermarket, I'm happy to pay the cost for the bits of the church I want to enjoy. Yeah, so it's that's, you know, those people are the people we want to encourage then to move through this list, if you like, move towards the submission and the sacrifice. Thank you, David. Does anyone else want to say anything there? If not, that's fine. You don't have to if you don't want to. Okay, let's move on. Oh, sorry, there's one more. Chris, majority probably in the support and subscription areas, but supermarket is definitely creeping in, even among our regular givers. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, the support and subscription areas are where I see a lot of church members, but even that supermarket is creeping in, even with regular givers. And I think that's, you can see that sometimes, can't you, when so there's maybe a certain fundraising campaign for a specific thing in the church, and if people say, oh yes, okay, that specific thing is the thing I want to support because that's what I can benefit from, that's where you're seeing the supermarket creeping in, because people are not just giving to the church, but they're giving to that specific thing that is a benefit to them. And we need to develop people's thinking from that, so that people can think more along the lines of discipleship. Okay, thank you. Let's move on. My cursor is getting very stuck today. I'm moving on slowly, but I will get there, I think. There we go. So practically, a few ways of encouraging generosity as discipleship. There's lots of resources on the Church of England website, which is that link at the bottom, which you'll receive when I send you the email tomorrow. But it's really important to preach and teach generosity. If you are a member of clergy, or if you're a reader or a local worship leader, think about how you can bring generosity into your preaching and your teaching in church, so that it's always in people's minds and they can understand the theology of it and how it relates to their own personal discipleship. Away days or retreats to think about generosity. There's some great resources there on the Church of England website. There's one called Journey of Generosity, which is sort of a full day reflection, really thinking about generosity and working through some of these issues and ideas and just helping people to think about what it means for their discipleship. There's another one called Generosity Fika. Fika is a Swedish word which means sitting over tea and cake, I think is the idea. But so the idea is it's an informal, maybe about half a day or a few hours, just sitting together and chatting informally about generosity. But there's some great resources to use for that. That's something that Jenny and I can come and help you with, or there's webinars as well explaining how you can do that. But all that information again is on the website there, if that's something that you think might be useful in your church, just to encourage people to think a little bit more about it. It's good to include generosity in small group Bible studies or in individual reflection, to encourage people to just, in their own personal reflections, to think about it. In the picture there's some nice little leaflets. The two at the front are just small reflections for individuals to take away. They're the sort of leaflets that you might leave around church for people to pick up, just take away. There's some Bible verses that they can reflect on. The Giving for Life one at the back, the yellow one, that gives a bit more sort of material to use in small groups, again thinking about generosity. These leaflets are things which you can order for free, or we can send some of those to you if you'd like some. So they're just some practical ideas to help you encourage people to think about discipleship and generosity. Okay, so we're moving on to the E now. Just let me check my chat box that no one else puts anything in. No, okay. So we're moving on to E for embed. And I've put a Bible verse there again. You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. So this is about being generous on every occasion and thanking God for that generosity. You see the little picture with the E there. It's got the 3 bobbins at the side and the thread leading to the picture of the church. It's kind of illustrating weaving generosity into every part of church life. So everything that we do, generosity should be woven into that. So encourage generosity regularly. As we said at the beginning, when we were talking about inspiring generosity, we should celebrate acts of generosity, any generosity that's going on within our church community or our local community, celebrate that to really embed it into what we're doing. And we talked about the mission, vision and mission and ministry plans. So embed generosity into that. So not just implying it in what we write in our mission statements, but actually naming it, like we saw in the diocesan mission, that a church that rejoices in the generosity of God. Generosity was actually named there. So it can often be implied in what we say in our mission, but if it's named, that really embeds it into the church's thinking and what we're aiming for as a church. And if we do this, we can change the culture. If people are constantly encouraged to think about generosity, if generosity is constantly mentioned in our services, in everything that we're doing and in our vision and mission, we can change the culture in our churches. People will realise that that is part and parcel of who we are and what we do in the church. Maybe if anyone wants to write anything in the chat again, think of ways. Are there ways that you do this practically in your church? Are there other ways that you could do this practically in your church, do you think, to really embed generosity into your church? How do you think you might be able to do that in your church? Or have you got ideas of things that you've already done to really embed that, to really make generosity part of the whole life of your church? If anyone's got any ideas there, please pop them in chat. So just thinking about how it can really, really be who we are and what we do. David Waters says, ideas, please. I on my next screen, I've got some ideas for you, but I thought I'd get yours first. But if you haven't got them for me at the moment, that's fine too. Okay, let's move on for now. But if you come up with any ideas, anybody, please just pop those into the chat box as well. Okay, so a few practical ways to embed generosity, and some of these we've mentioned already because they're the same, some of the same things as how to inspire generosity. It's how to embed generosity as well. So we talked about inspiring people with testimonies, and again, if that happens regularly, if we have those testimonies regularly, maybe a little slot, even every week, you could have just a little slot where somebody says something about how they've experienced generosity from either the position of a receiver or a giver. So if that's a regular thing, not just a once a year, talking about generosity once a year, but actually regularly returning to that and encouraging people to think about that regularly. And again, in your intercessions, bringing in prayer about generosity and to thank God for some of those generous things that have been going on in your church. In your church notices, highlight generous acts or activities that have been going on your notice sheet, or maybe on your notice board in church. Highlight some of those generous things that have been going on and name it as generosity. If you see an increase in giving in your church, if you see that more regular givers are coming on board, if people are increasing their gifts, talk about it, encourage people, say thank you to those people who've increased their giving, and other people will then be encouraged and inspired. And if we talk about it all the time, it will become just the norm for the church. It will become who we are. Introduce generous projects to your church. projects which support the poor, projects which give time to the community. Thinking back to that example from my church of the community larder, that kind of thing just shows that the church is a generous church and wants to act out that generosity. And give gifts. Many of you have Christmas and harvest giving, which is wonderful, where you're really generous and give your harvest gifts, give Christmas baskets, or different ways of being generous at these special times. But think about as well developing that and then moving on from that to regularly support those vulnerable families, those individuals. Maybe it's the homeless, maybe it's just people in your community who are in need. But as well as doing that, as well as focusing on that at Christmas and harvest, make that a regular thing, something that's embedded within the culture of your church, that you're consistently helping those people. Okay, and sometimes as well, it's helpful to focus on generosity for a period of time. I've been saying that it's good to do it all the time, but it is helpful to have a focus and then to run with that into the future. So one way of doing that is to have a giving program, which might be over a few weeks, perhaps with a preaching series. And there's some great resources again online. So just some practical resources here for if you want to run a giving program. So a giving program might be something that involves preaching and teaching, but also looks at the finances of the church and how people can respond, and to encourage people to give, both financially and in other ways. So some of the resources, one of them is Giving in Grace, and I will send you the links to all of these. Giving in Grace, it's a really good tool. It's got all sorts of resources in it. It has templates for giving reviews where you can fill in your church's finances, or you can fill in some of the wonderful things that your church has been doing in the community, just in a small leaflet so people can read it, they can take it away, they can pray over it and work out how they can respond, how they can maybe increase their giving, or how they can respond in different ways. It has some really good resources, some good preaching resources to help you with developing sermons on generosity, resources for small groups, resources for young people, for children. It's a very big resource, actually. Sometimes people can be a bit overwhelmed. So if you're not so good online, it might not be the one for you. If you're quite IT literate, it's a good one to use, but it is quite overwhelming. The Simple Giving program is a very similar one. That's a lot easier to navigate online. So it might be one to start with, to have a look at, and then maybe just picking one or two things out from Giving in Grace. So the Simple Giving program is quite helpful for a more rural village church, which I know many of your churches are that sort of context, a rural village context. So that's quite a helpful one. Again, it's got some great resources, not quite as many as there are in Giving in Grace, but it's got some really useful resources and templates that you can use. And then the parish funding programme works well with any size of church, and that's quite an easy one to navigate online as well. And it's very strong on vision and mission. If you're wanting to start by developing your vision and mission, it's quite a good one to use, but it's got a lot of resources for that, and then it moves on to looking at a general giving review. So those are some really good resources, and again, these are things that Jenny and I can help you with. If you're thinking of starting off a giving review in your church, give us a call, or Daniel as well, who's our new colleague. We can help you with this. So give us a call and we can talk you through it, show you where some of the best resources are. So those were all ways to help embed generosity in the church. Just going back again, if you're running this giving program, let's say it's over a period of maybe a few weeks, but then going on from that, make sure that you continue to run with it. And in those ways that I said before, continue to make generosity sort of at the forefront of what you're doing. Okay, so activate. So we're coming towards the end now, the last letter in IDEA, activate. So this is all about sort of kickstarting generosity really in your church. So there's often people who want to be generous, but they they don't necessarily know how to be generous in the church. But with support and with encouragement, they will be generous because they want to be. It's in their heart to be generous, but they don't necessarily know how. So give people ways to be generous. Don't just talk about it. Show them how they can do that in different ways, whether it's providing the mechanisms for financial giving, or whether it's providing the projects for giving to the community and giving to the poor. Demonstrate generosity. Now, we said that right at the beginning. We talked about church leaders and PCCs demonstrating generosity themselves to inspire people. But it's not just for the leaders, it's for everyone in the church to demonstrate that generosity, so that other people will be encouraged to get on board. And if you see people being generous, even if it's just in very small ways, encourage people and say, oh, it was wonderful what you did there, what we saw you doing for this other person. That was a wonderful thing, and really encourage people in their generosity. So how can we activate generosity? Well, I'm going to go back a little bit to the acronym from last time, the MINT acronym. How can we activate generosity? Well, firstly, make sure people are aware of how they can give. So from MINT, that's the M, that's the mechanisms, making sure that the mechanisms are in place for people to give. And then make sure people understand the need and the impact. So again, going back to MINT, that's the I and the N from MINT. Make sure people understand the impact that their giving has. Make sure people understand the need of the church for their giving. And then that generosity will be activated in their hearts. Show people how generosity isn't just about money, but about how they live their lives. So we're going back now to that discipleship, back to the D, that it is about living your life as generous disciples, responding to our generous God, and show people that you're living your life in a generous way, that the leadership of the church are living their lives in a generous way, and highlight generous acts of the church as a whole. Make it clear how generosity is embedded in all the church does. So communicate, as we've been saying, use those testimonies, use your notice sheet, communicate that generosity, use your website, put stories about generosity up on your website or your Facebook page so that people can see that the church is a generous church. And as we said before, provide activities and projects which inspire and encourage generosity. And all these ideas will kind of kickstart generosity within the church. And then if it's really embedded in what the church is, and people are encouraged to understand that generosity is part of their discipleship, then that will continue into the future. Okay, so that's activate. Where are we? Yes, we're doing well for time. Okay, so a few ideas then for activating generosity. Again, I'm going back to some of the resources on the Church of England website. Some of these you might think are great, some of them you might think, oh no, we don't want to do that, but different churches, different people like different methods. Generosity Week is a really helpful resource, which is on the Church of England website, and it's a week of materials. There's podcasts for each day of the week, there's sermon materials, worship materials, all sorts of different things. This is something we will probably do as a diocese at a certain time, but it's something you can tap into at any time as well. But it's something that you can use to activate generosity as a kind of starter to get people thinking about generosity before you continue to embed that into the life of your church. The generous harvest is an idea that has been used in some churches where they focus on 11 months of the year to cover the costs of their mission and ministry. And then the final month of the year, everything that comes in, they give away in whatever way they see fit, whether that's to the local community, whether that's to overseas mission, in whatever way they give that away for 1 month. Now, that's not to say that for 11 months they don't give anything. They continue giving away and being generous as well, but they make sure that all their costs are covered in those 11 months. And in that 1 month, everything is given away. They don't keep anything for the church. So that's just an idea. And again, that's activating generosity. So it's obviously, we want to continuously be generous, but that's something to just start you off. Tithing is an important concept that many of us don't promote in our churches. Biblically, we are called to give 10% of our income back to God, back to the church. And that might be an idea to introduce in your church if you don't do that already. But it might be something that you think, oh, people won't respond to that. It might be something you can do gradually in the first year, ask people to commit to giving 2% of their income to the church, and then gradually increase it, ask people to commit to gradually increasing that if you think that suddenly tithing is going to be too much for people. But yeah, start small and encourage people to year on year increase their gift. And that can be one way of introducing that idea of tithing a little bit more gently. The Boomerang offertory, this is something I've read about. Practically, I think it could be a bit of a nightmare, but it's a lovely idea. The idea is that on a particular Sunday, that all the money that comes in on that day, you give it back to the church. So you separate all that offertory into envelopes and give a little bit to everybody in the congregation or in the church. And you ask them to decide how they're going to be generous with what the church has. So they have to be generous. They need to give that money to someone else or give that money to an organisation, perhaps. So it's putting that onto people to think, oh, this is the church's money. How am I going to be generous with this money? And it's just to get people to start thinking about generosity and about how the church can be generous. So it's a nice little thing, again, to kickstart that thinking about generosity, to activate generosity in the church. Okay, so finally, last time we looked at Mint. So that's creating an environment of generosity, which we need first. We need to create that environment where people have the mechanisms to enable them to give, whether that's regular giving, whether it's contactless giving, whatever it is. We need people to be able to understand the impact that their giving has. We need people to understand the need of the church for their gifts. And we need people to trust their church leaders, to be able to see how their money is being spent and how the vision of the church is being acted out. And that sets the right environment for generosity and for responding to God. And then today we've looked at idea. So just to summarize what we've been talking about, we really need to inspire people first to be generous. Then we need to encourage them to understand that generosity is part of their discipleship. It's part of their daily life. It's not just about giving of their money, but it's about living as generous disciples to God. And then we should try to embed generosity, weaving that generosity into everything that we do as a church, and to make it part and parcel of who we are and what we do. And then finally, looking for ways to activate or kickstart that process of thinking about generosity. And if we do that, we can develop a culture of generosity in the church. And those two things together hopefully will encourage people to live that generous lifestyle. So finally, that's just our contacts. As I said, he's not here today, but we have a new colleague called Daniel who's joined us a couple of weeks ago. So there's 3 generous giving advisors at the diocese, and we're always here to help you in whatever way we can. So please don't be afraid to call us. Sorry, I'm just having to, my computer is running out of charge. I'm just having to move it across a little bit. I'm in a different room to usual this week as I have visitors, so it's quite a long way from the plug socket, but I'm just going to plug it in. Here we go.
Hello? Hello?
Sorry. And a phone call's coming in there as well. Right, so yeah, so please feel free to contact us whenever you want to, and we can help you to explore some of these issues. Okay, at that point, I'm going to stop there. And if anyone has any questions or any ideas of things that you've been doing in your own churches, that'd be great to hear some of those ideas. But if you have any questions too, I'd love to receive those.
Christine, I'm just going to make a comment on what you've said and what you were saying. I was just saying, as we're going through, there's no such thing as overthanking.
Yeah.
So however small, we might think, oh, they haven't done very much, but it still means a lot when people get thanked. And I've seen people going from giving tiny amounts to giving very large amounts simply because they've been appreciated.
Yeah.
There's no greater thing than being appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think we have any questions, do we? Well, I hope that was helpful to you all. And I will be sending an email tomorrow with the presentation. Thank you, David, for your comment there. I'll send you an email tomorrow with the presentation and some links to some of those resources as well. And please do have a look back at some of the previous webinars if you've missed them. There's some really, really helpful webinars that we've done in the past as well. So do have a look back, and I'll send you links to those tomorrow as well. Yeah, Jenny, would you like to just pray before we finish?
Yeah. Thank you, Lord, that your mind is so much greater than ours. You can give us ideas which will help grow your church and increase your kingdom and bring glory to you. Now, Lord, as we go from one another, let these new ideas stimulate us and let us be a blessing as we go back to our churches, not particularly wanting others to do what we won't do ourselves, but taking these things on board so that we can become the generous people you desire us to be. So help us as we do that, and even our lifestyles will inspire others. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Jenny. And thank you all for coming. And hope you have a good day in this beautiful sunshine. See you all again.